So the story with this vehicle is it's a 2011 Edge, and the HCU was failing. And what they did was they did a self-test on the HCU and it failed. It was intermittently actuating actuators that weren't supposed to be actuated, not to the point where it was causing any like concern for the brakes locking up, but doing stuff that it shouldn't have done. They took it to a shop that had the software to bleed the ABS module, but I think a lot of people don't realize you can't just stick an HCU in a vehicle, do an ABS bleed up, and then follow it with a manual bleed. I was told they did it 4 to 5 times and then no air came out. It's always nice to let the vehicle sit for a little bit and then come back the next day and try it again. I know that's not standard procedure, but sometimes you run into situations like that. So they had to bring the vehicle to the dealership because they lost some confidence in the independent shop that did it. It's not that they did anything wrong. It's just you run into this situation sometimes, and a lot of independent shops get a bad rep because they let it go too fast. HCU procedure should be just install, bleed up, program, manual bleed, let it go. Sometimes it doesn't work quite that easy. I ended up bringing it back into the shop. I did an ABS bleed on this vehicle. Then I went right into manual bleeding after the actuators and everything, the little solenoids inside, the valves actuated, and on each caliper individually I got a little puff of air out of it, enough to cause a squishy low pedal. Still brakes, wasn't like a safety issue or anything, but a low pedal. And you'd like to normally feel it somewhere up top, a third of the way down, brakes being applied pretty easy under a vacuum assist. So that's what I had to work through on this, just to kind of shed some light on the situation that may be at hand. It's not that the shop did anything wrong, it's just they didn't go through enough ABS bleed procedure to make sure that there was no air in the system. And I've had the vehicle for 3 days now, letting it sit overnight to just make sure that there's no air in the system, and the brakes have been perfectly fine every single time I drive it now. I went for an 8-mile run, went for a 12-mile run, just now I went for a 6-mile run. Brakes not acting up, getting on it hard, getting normal braking or extreme braking, not to destroy the brakes or anything, but to really make that ABS start to function, like leaving the shop and coming to a quick brake on the slick floor and making the valves actually kick in to see if I got a sinking pedal, that there's maybe some kind of air still in the system. But at the same time, physically letting it move while hitting the brakes and making those solenoids or those valves actuate, I shouldn't say solenoids, valves actuate, can show you if there's air in the system as well. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the computer test, but that's what it took to get all the air out of the system on this. Aside from the multiple times the shops did the ABS actuation plus the manual bleed, I had to do it 3 more times just to make sure everything was clearing out of the system and up to par with fluid level. So this vehicle will be returned back to the customer, but this is an issue that you may run into when replacing an HCU. So just shed some awareness on that. Just a quick talking point this morning to get you guys out a video to let you know kind of some of the stuff we deal with as technicians. It's not always clean cut and dry by the book. Sometimes it's multiple times of doing the same thing over and over and over again, and to get all the air out of the system. And 4 or 5 times you would think that that's plenty enough. In this situation it was not. I went to back right, got a puff of air out of it, back left, got a puff of air out of it, front right, got a puff of air out of it, front left caliper, driver's side, got a puff of air out of it. And then I did 2 more bleed ups and manual bleeds after that, and then finally everything was in the clear. So I've drove it several days now with no issues. Now I'm going to return it back to the customer and let them know that everything's safe and no more sinking pedal. Everything's nice and up. I'll show you. See, I just hit it and the vehicle's already coming to a stop. Before, you used to have to push the pedal all the way down before it would come to a stop, and now it's nice and right up top. So we're good. Thanks, guys.